This is the video project of the cell wall by Alec Castle and Matt Kress. Alright, first we're going to talk about the description of the cell wall. A cell wall is a rigid extracellular structure which is found mainly in plant cells. Cell walls can also be found in fungi and bacteria as well. The outer layer of animal cells is referred to as the cell membrane, so animal cells do not contain cell walls. In plants, a cell wall is comprised mainly of cellulose. Cellulose is a rigid layer of polysaccharides lying outside the plasma membrane. In young plant cells, the cell wall is less rigid to allow for growth of the cell. It contrasts to older plant cells, which is more rigid, and that's why they do not grow as much. The first cell that has a cell wall that I'm going to talk about is a fungus. A fungus is actually pretty similar to a plant cell. A fungus contains a nucleus, cell wall, lysosome, plasma membrane, centrioles, Golgi apparatus, ribosomes, mitochondria, and an endoplasmic reticulum. Fungi are different from both viruses and bacteria in many ways. They are larger, plant-like organisms that lack chlorophyll. Since fungi do not have chlorophyll to make food, they have to absorb food from whatever they are growing on. Fungi can actually be very helpful also, such as in brewing beer, making bread rise, and decomposing trash. Alright, so this is a picture of a plant cell. As you can see, it has its usual organelles, cytoplasm, and nucleus. If you look near the top of the cell, you will see a box and an arrow pointing to the cell wall. The cell wall surrounds the entire cell, and this is what gives it its shape. Plants, trees, and so on would be nothing without their cell walls. So as you can tell, the cell wall is very unique and important to the cell. This is a close-up picture of a cell wall, which is very rigid and is made up of cellulose. That's why plants need an excess amount of cellulose so they can form their cell walls and survive. This is why the cell wall is the most important part of a plant cell. Just imagine, the world would be nothing without cell walls. Alright, before I start talking about the cell wall again, I'm going to talk about cellulose. Cellulose is a long chain of linked sugar. It is also a natural polymer, which means it's a long chain made by linking up smaller molecules. Again, this is the main source for the cell wall, and the cell wall will not be formed without it. Here's a short diagram about cellulose. Plants are made of plant cells, and plant cells are formed by the cell walls. The cell walls are composed of cellulose. So basically what I'm trying to say is that cellulose is what basically forms plants and trees and the earth. So that's why cellulose is very important for our world. Alright, now we're going to talk about the parts of the cell wall. The cell wall is composed of three parts. The first part is the primary cell wall, the next part is the gluey pectin layer, and then the last part is the secondary cell wall. On the diagram on the right, the primary cell wall is the yellow shaded part. The gluey pectin layer is the red part in the middle, and then the secondary cell wall is the orange shaded part on the left side and the right side. The first part of the cell wall that I'm going to talk about is the primary cell wall. The primary cell wall is the part or layer of the cell in which cell growth is permitted. Basically, this part of the cell wall allows for the plant to grow. Compared to the secondary cell wall, this layer contains more pectin, and lignin is absent until a secondary wall has formed on top of it. Here's a diagram of the primary cell wall. There are three components that make it up. The first part is the cellulose microfibril, the next part is the plasma membrane, and the last part is the hemicellulose. Together, all these parts form the primary cell wall. The next part of the cell wall is the gluey pectin layer. This layer of the cell wall is the part of the cell that holds it all together. Without it, the cell cannot hold itself and it will fall apart. It keeps the cell intact with all the organelles and the nucleus inside. In this diagram of the gluey pectin layer, it is consisting of alternating layers of cellulose fibrils. These fibrils actually hold the cell wall together as well as the cell. So it is pretty obvious that the pectin layer of the cell wall is very important for the cell. The last part of the cell wall is the secondary cell wall. The secondary cell wall is a secondary wall that is deposited between the primary cell wall and plasma membrane that renders support, strength, and protection. The secondary cell wall consists mainly of cellulose, but also other polysaccharides, lignin, and proteins. So basically, the secondary cell wall is the backbone of the entire cell. This is a diagram of the secondary cell wall. The top part shows all the particles that make up the secondary cell wall, and the bottom part shows how big the secondary cell wall actually is. Notice that it is twice the size as the primary cell wall, which shows that it's definitely the backbone of the entire cell. This is why the secondary cell wall is very important for all plant cells. Now I'm going to recap the functions of the cell wall. The major functions of the cell wall are to protect the cell from outside forces, serve like a guard at the gate, determine the shape of the cell, give the cell most of its strength, and one thing that I did not mention yet was control the trigger pressure. The trigger pressure is the pressure of water inside of the cell. So even though the cell wall may be very small, it is completely necessary for life. Now I'm going to talk about bacterial cells. The reason I did not talk about these cells earlier is because fungi and plant cells are different from bacteria. Bacteria also cause plant disorders. All bacteria have the same basic structure, and most of them actually do have a cell wall. Their cell walls are also very rigid and provides protection for the bacterial cell. Since bacterial cells are prokaryotes, they do not have a nucleus, and the genetic material simply floats around in the cytoplasm. Remember, the genetic material contains the instructions for all of the cell's functions. If you look at this diagram of the bacterial cell, you can see that it has many differences between other cells, including its capsule, scattered DNA, bacterial flagellum, and pili. All these differences make the bacterial cell different from many other cells. Disorders of the cell wall. Most disorders of the cell wall are a result of wall weakening or breakage. These disorders frequently lead to discharging the cell contents and cell death. Damage to the cell wall can be caused by chemical changes such as cellulose digesting enzymes, physical property changes such as freezing and thawing, and mechanical stress such as cell wall breakage caused by force. Some common examples of these disorders are bacterial soft rot, frost damage caused by changes in the weather, and bruising of produce. Now I'm going to talk about the bacterial soft rot. This is an extremely lethal disorder common to fruits and vegetables. With the help from special enzymes, the fruit turns into a liquidy mush. That because the bacteria consumes the plant cell's nutrients, the fruit is uneatable and useless. Here is a picture of this disorder. As you can see, it is very deadly to the fruit or vegetable. This is how deadly bacteria can be, and you don't want to eat anything that has been infected by it. This is why the cell wall is so important, because it protects the cell from things like this. Alright, so we are coming to an end of the video. We hope that you learned a lot of new facts about the cell wall and enjoyed our presentation. I'm Alec Castle, along with Matt Kress, and this is our video of the cell wall.